Welcome everyone. Today, September, what's it, 18th, I think, September 18th. We're here, we're on screen, we're here. What is going on? Of course, Mandy, I'll ask you how your weekend was, and you can ask me how my weekend was. So,
Okay,
how was
Amani.
your weekend?
Amani, you look so pained. You look so pained that we have to chit chat. Can we just be transparent?
Yeah.
I'm gonna spill the tea here. So before we got on the show today, I've been listening to some of our podcasts, and early on in our podcast, I think when I just started to get to know each other, were giggly and it was like really fun. And now when we get on, we're like, let's get to we're all business. We're like, follow our LinkedIn page, follow sponsor the show. Like we've got this thing. So today, I'm like, Amani, can we chat? Can we chit chat a little bit before
Yeah.
the show starts? I feel like we're all business, but now
Yes.
you were paid. It seemed like this was painstaking for you to talk about your week. Can you talk about, or no, I have an idea.
Yes.
Your birthday.
Uh-huh.
Your birthday was
All
last
right.
week
Yes, it
and you
was.
were gonna do something and you weren't sure. So what did you do for your birthday, Amani?
Okay. Okay. Also, hello to Janet. Good to see you, Janet, watching over on Facebook today.
Hey,
Okay, so
Janet.
birthday was Thursday. I had to teach. So my plan was to go teach, and then I would go to MPI, and then after I go get in and out, and then if I still had room in my belly, I'd go get some Cold Stone. So I,
Ooh.
I have a ritual where every time I have a student that I teach and they come to class on their birthday, I'll give them a cupcake. So
Aw, what kind of
Thursday,
cupcake?
it's their choice. Usually it's red velvet.
Okay.
It's from a local vendor near Cal State Fullerton campus, just because I know a lot of students will just bail on their birthday. So if you come to class, then you can get a reward. So anyway,
Aw.
we were in class, we were teaching, we were doing a fun music activity. This is music business class. And at the end, the student kind of left and comes back with this Starbucks. And then as soon as she walks in, the entire class starts to sing me happy birthday. And they were loud, and
Oh.
it was really cool because they were into it and it was cool, and they sang me happy birthday, and that was probably the highlight of my day. It was really nice, and it touched me. And so they gave me like some cake pops and Starbucks
Aw.
gift card. It was really cool. So that was probably the high of the birthday. Then I drove from Fullerton to, where were we? Woodland Hills, 1 hour and a half drive, and had lunch with Rolando. He was there, so we had a spontaneous lunch. Then we had
Ooh.
our meeting. Then I came back home, went to In and Out, but I was full. So I
Oh,
held
no.
off on Cold Stone till the next day. So the next day I went to get Cold Stone evening. I got my Cold Stone ice cream, which was delightful. And then I'll go do pancakes next week. I wanted to space it out. With my health journey, I can't do all the stuff at once. I got to space it out. So that was it. I'm still debating on what I'm going to buy for myself.
Mhm.
Like I bought some classes recently. Like I'm taking improv class, so I've been to two improv
Oh.
classes, and
Amani, I bought myself improv classes like 10
yes,
years ago for my birthday, and it was fun, but I was awful at improv. So I like, how are you? Have you learned bunny bunny yet? Have you learned like bunny, 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 bunny? Have you learned
no,
that
we
one
are
yet?
in Bip Bop Boom or whatever. We learned Bip Bop Boom. We learned a lot of like the different little activities. It's really cool. I'm picking it up pretty quickly, and no questions. You can't ask any questions. I always have to kind of remember that. But it's cool. So that's kind of the birthday summary. And I've just been cleaning out my house and everything. That's what I've been up to.
I love that. Really quick, what kind of Cold Stone, what kind of ice cream did you have for your
I
Friday?
had our strawberry blonde. That's my favorite one. It's a mixture of strawberry with some caramel and some stuff. It's great. It's
Oh, that's
delightful.
I have an idea of what you could buy yourself for this weekend.
What's that?
Some Prilosec. Like, I feel like you're gonna get heartburn from all this, like, and
Well,
you
I
gotta
was in the bathroom the next day, so I had to pay the price. But it was worth it. I'm
It's
still
worth
paying the price, but it was worth it.
it's worth it. What would Jenny Perrin say? Our old guest, Jenny Perrin, our
Yes,
nutritionist, just drink
I
some
know.
water,
Oh,
do a
yes, drink
digestion
water.
walk. Yeah, do a
We gotta
digestion
say
walk,
hello to
drink some
Vicky.
water.
Vicky's in the chat. Nolan, yes, Nolan. I agree. He went to Coastal this weekend too. It's so worth it. So we got
Yeah.
people here watching us. Now, do you want to share anything, or what do we want to do next, Mandy?
Oh, Amani. Well, I want to give a shout out. I want to give a shout out to you're in so much pain. I love it. We're gonna give a shout out to the Monarch Beach, the Waldorf Astoria Monarch Beach Resort, because we went, my husband and I went there this weekend. We had a lovers trip. We took the dog and it was spectacular. It is just one of the best resorts in the world. It's always been my favorite, but we'd never brought the dog before. Luca fit in like she owned the place. She was sitting on furniture she probably shouldn't have. They had a little doggy bed for her and little dog. It's super dog friendly without feeling like skeevy dog friendly. And it
Yeah.
was just
Yeah.
beautiful. It was a great weekend. So just big shout out to that resort. They did a great job and I was really overwhelmed and impressed with them. So oh,
Round of applause.
do you any, are there other sound effects in there besides the claps?
Yeah.
Like what else is in
Hold
there?
on. I'll play you some. Keep talking. I'll play you some funny ones we have here. Hold on.
Oh,
Let's
okay. That's
wait,
fun.
wait.
That's fun.
Yeah, there's some
Well,
fun ones we have here. Go ahead.
I did see Nolan in the chat. I saw him a couple weeks ago in Tampa. And do you remember one of our shows? He said that he had a fear of public speaking, and
Mm.
he gave a speech and he crushed it. I saw it live.
Yeah,
He crushed
we
it. Yeah.
love it.
So
Yes. So we
yeah,
won't.
that's
We'll give you
great.
the opposite of this, Nolan. A little sad trombone. I have lots of little effects here and stuff. I'm trying to think what else I have here. Oh, this one maybe.
Ew, I hate that voice. Oh, that's great. That's
Yeah,
great.
all sorts of different effects here. So yeah, so there's some cool ones here.
Oh, good.
Music's played in. Tom Griggs has been in the building too. Good to see you,
Hey,
Tom Griggs,
Tom.
who said self-care matters. Now, I'm going to let you introduce our guest, Mandy.
Yeah.
I have lots of questions. I've known her for a while, so I want to hear how you introduce her. And I'm excited because we got some questions. One question related to one of Mandy's goals, which Zoe's going to help you with. Take it away.
Ooh, okay. We have Zoe Moore, and I first met Zoe October 2021. We were at the MPI Thought Leadership Summit. We were both speakers. I went after her, which was very difficult because she crushes. She's a veteran of the Army. She is the founder of Grow with Zomo. She helps leaders craft diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. She developed a certificate program for DE&I. She's a mom. And every time I have a conversation with her, I learn something and I feel like I grow. And today she's going to help all of us grow. So drop your questions in the chat because we're bringing on Zoe Moore to just crush it with us today.
I feel like a shoulder bounce is in due. Like,
Yes, shoulder bounce, shoulder bounce.
yes.
You can brush it off. Yes, yes.
Where's
Well,
the speaker coach that like tells you how to handle being humble in these moments when you get introduced?
I'm thinking they would tell you to accept the adoration, come into the arena, and just be ready to get with it.
Let me
So,
turn on some music. Okay.
okay, what music did you turn on? What is your
Oh,
walk-up song? And if you're walking out to go to bat at a baseball game,
oh,
what song is playing?
there is on the movie Till, there is a Jasmine Sullivan song, and it
Mm,
is Stand Up. And that song
mm,
makes me cry every time I hear it.
Mm.
And it's just this powerful song about you can make a difference. It's like you have to do this. Like you got to keep going. You got to keep advocating for the work that you're doing and
really?
stand up. Jasmine Sullivan. Oh, see now I should have told you about the song. You gonna cry?
We don't want you to cry. We'll play
Don't
the intro a
cry.
little bit. There you
Yeah.
go. Okay,
That,
just for you.
that that girl can sing. If you ever seen
Oh yeah,
Coming to America, that girl can sing. She can
yeah,
sing. Yes,
yeah.
it hits my soul. Okay.
Okay, so you got a little music intro, just work it out
Yes.
today. My first question for you
Yes.
is, do you ever wish that your mom named you Gertrude?
Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
damn it. Marty, this was my question. Darn
Okay.
it. Okay. Okay.
Word of advice first, be careful what you tell your colleagues and your friends because
Mhm.
yes, Gertrude was one of the names my mom was going to name me. But she chose four names instead, or three. So Gertie uh, was the nickname, and she chose Shariga Tanae Alandra was all the names
Mhm.
that she chose. So no, I do not wish that she would have named me Gertrude. Although I love all the Gerties and the Gertrudes out there. No qualms with your name.
Right.
Um, but I went from Shariga to Zoe. That's a whole journey in and of itself. But yeah, it's funny that you remember that.
Okay. Yeah. Manny, since I stole your first question, I'm gonna let you have the second one. My bad.
It's
I'm
just
gonna take 2.
dirty.
I'm gonna take 2 from you. So, let's stay with your name. So,
Mhm.
Chiriga and Zoe.
Yeah.
Can you tell what does the name Chiriga mean, and then where did Zoe come from?
Ooh, so Shariga, from what I'm told from my mom, she found it in a names book, a baby name book, but she liked the story behind it that it was Shariga was associated with a Native American tribe in like Northeast, and it literally meant, from what she read, child of poor parents. I
Mm,
don't know why that resonated with her. She said she liked the name. She didn't care about the meaning. I'm a person all about symbols and meanings. And what it meant, not poor monetary, but poor in character. So
mm.
Mhm.
interesting why you would choose that name, but I love my name nonetheless. Shariga is how you pronounce it, phonetically Shareega. Shariga. Zoe came from doing, fast forward, I am in college, between military college and really active at this church in like the Bay Area. And I did some poetry. I was doing poetry, this burrito joint called Iguanas, and a guy walks up to me after I did a set or so and said, "Every time you speak, I'm in your zone of energy. I'm gonna call you Zoe." And I was like, "Excuse me, my name is Shariga, you know." And then following that, somebody asked me, "Hey, what's your name?" And I was like, "Zoe." And I was like, "What? Where did that come from?" Like, and so it stuck 20, 25 years ago. And Zoe is a name, and it, Zoe is associated with life in Greek.
Hmm.
Zone of energy kind of relates to that. So I always say Zoe and not Zoe.
Got
Mm.
it. I love that. Well, I wanna switch gears for a minute. I'm happy you shared that because I was like,
Yeah.
"Should we call you Zoe? Should we call you Shariga?" So thank you for that. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
My mom would want you to call me Shariga, not Gertrude. But yes,
Okay.
No,
yes.
Gertrude. Yeah,
So
oh, before you go,
yeah.
shout out to Janet. She says she's so happy to see us together. Janet Whitehead Davis. She says that she took your EDEIS certification class and loved it. So I want to
Oh,
share that.
thank you.
Janet,
Thank you so
you
much for
share.
that.
Go ahead, Mandy.
Oh, that's
That
awesome.
is awesome.
That's great. Hi, Janice. So I want to share the first time I saw you speak,
Mhm.
something that you taught me, and I think all of us in that was that, we pick people we're running conferences, right? And we're picking speakers for conferences and we're
Mhm.
creating content all the time. But something that you really challenged the audience that day was systematically who is on your conference committee, who is on your
Mhm.
board of directors.
Mhm.
And it's great to make sure the attendees are diverse, but it's even better to make sure the people making the decisions represent all of the voices. So if people are putting their conference together like right now, or they're putting together a collection of people, like what is some advice that you have for them, like the top 2 or 3 things that can really systematically like set off the
Mhm.
diversity, equity, and inclusion piece?
Yeah, that great question. I think, it starts with your team. It starts with, really having some self-awareness of who's around you, because oftentimes we'll get in that tunnel vision, or we'll get into that group think, or people who echo what we already believe instead of challenging it, right? And so if you don't have the opportunity to hire people, then whether it's consulting, whether it's running by your friends or outside of your circle, the content that you're proposing, the speakers that you're proposing, people who are different from you in all the identities, the social identifying ways, and just the industry that they're in. Have them challenge what you're putting forth. See if they understand it outside of that close knit group. So that's number one way, is be open to feedback. I think I've told, plenty of people who kind of run from, getting feedback, that feedback leads to an opportunity to grow. And so don't be afraid of it. Welcome it. And by starting there, challenging yourself, did I select the speakers that need to be in this program? Did I select the content? So start there. That's where I would go, because a lot of times this focus has been on, like you said, the audience and
Mhm.
not internal. A lot of external work and not the internal work. And that's where we need to start.
I love that. And then quick follow up to that too is you know, in the old days, I used to think,
Mhm,
and this is my naivety, is I used to
mhm,
think DE&I was, you know, color of our skin or a little bit of
mhm,
our background. And what I've learned over the last couple years is like somebody with an auditory issue or somebody in a
mhm,
wheelchair. So, could you explain a little bit about like what are some of those ways? Like what can people look for? What are people
mhm.
missing right now when they're not considering all the different audiences?
Yeah, I mean, we're all different. I think that's the fear, is that embracing our differences, like that idea of the melting pot, kind of concept that we're supposed to come together and blend together, versus, say that okay, you're deaf, or you're hard of hearing, you're blind, or your language that you speak, the religion, even the way that you may be a person with disability. I'm a service disabled veteran, but it doesn't mean that I'm an ambulatory, that I cannot, or I'm immobile, that I use a wheelchair or a mobile device. It goes into your generation, different age groups, and or the region in which you grew up in. I mean, I could keep going on and on. We want to get away from that melting pot mindset into the ability to embrace our differences. But I also challenge people, because as much as I think oftentimes when we say, DEI is not about race, gender, sexual orientation, I hone in, or I sense a fear to talk about race, to talk about gender, because the history of, speaking specifically from like U.S. context, that's the history. And where DEI started as an industry is with the civil rights movement. So we can never get away from that conversation, because when we're talking about race, when we're talking about all the ways that we socially identify, when it comes to race, individuals still have a disability, speak a different language, have a different religion, a different class that they're from, an education level. So we have to be able to talk about, have this conversation through an intersectional lens, all of our identities, all of our differences. And then in the end, when we're able to discuss our differences, those outcomes, both on the things that we do and the conversations that we have, are more robust. And so it's a combination of the things. It's not just race, it's all the ways that you identify. And there's a multiple ways in which we identify, as we
Mm.
walk through life, even our experiences, it's just, there's a long list.
I like that, with the goal of making the conversation robust. I love that.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can
Because
can you
there's a, oh,
Oh, keep going. Go ahead, go ahead.
no, I just, there's this wonderful TED talk, and it's called the problem with the singular narrative, and I have to pull up the speaker's name. She's amazing, but she talks about seeing things through one identity, and where that has steered us in the wrong direction, and we have to
Mm.
challenge that. Whose lens am I looking through? Whose lived experience? So again, embracing our differences.
Now,
I love
can you
that.
share a little bit, maybe you can take us through the exercise about your affinity bias chart exercise that you do?
Yeah.
And that will relate to kind of Mandy and I had some discussions
Mhm.
in past. I was like, Mandy, you kind of got to get some more diverse friends so you can understand some more perspectives. And I think that your exercise feeds right into that.
Absolutely. That exercise seems to really resonate with a lot of people, and I tend to, as a speaker, prefer to do exercises than speak at people. And so this
Mhm.
particular exercise, I don't know when I started using it, but you have this chart across the top. I ask you to identify 6 different individuals, and we can choose who those individuals are. It could be authors, it could be directors, musicians. We can go into the industry and talk about the vendors and suppliers that you use. Identify 6 people. On the left hand side, you list all the federal characteristics, the federally protected characteristics. Now, if you go back into the Civil Rights Act, 1964, and gradually until now, there are identities that had to be federally protected because they weren't able to get employed, they weren't able to get housing, things like that. So you list all these identities, and they go over gender, religion, sexual orientation, marital status, things like that. And so, what I ask you to do in the exercise is, then after you've listed all those people, do you know their characteristics? Do you know their different identities? And then once you do that, do you recognize any patterns or behaviors? And so in these conversations, somebody will say, well, all of my, friends are in the age group of 45 to 50. Everybody that I know is a Christian. Everybody
Mhm.
that I know is in this industry. And so the lesson being, how can that impact or influence what you think and understand, how you view, whether it's you're watching the news, you're reading a book, how does that impact how you think about it? And it goes back to what I said in the beginning. You get into that tunnel vision, like on your team. If your team is homogenous, everyone looks the same, comes from the same social economic background, the same religion, they're going to approach topics through a similar lens and perspective. And if you want to challenge yourself, if you truly want to grow, growth is uncomfortable. You have to be able to sit across from somebody who has a different view than you. So the affinity bias chart, ABC, is the elementary way to get started and say, I need to do better in surrounding myself with people who don't look like me, think like me, don't read the same books, so forth and so on. So yes, I love that exercise. Let's do it.
Interesting.
I like that. I
We
like
could,
that.
yes. Mhm.
Yeah. So what did you both do the exercise? Has it been floating around? Because I know it's PDF'd. Have you
Right.
actually done it for
Well,
yourself?
we actually wanted to take Mandy through the exercise, but,
Mm.
because Manny, share with your perspective on how when I was talking, I was like, "Oh, you need to kind of get some different friends and everything." Can I talk about that?
Mhm,
Well, because we
mhm.
were talking early on, it's like a year ago. We were talking about our guests. And I was like, so my guest, my little zone guest was like, a female entrepreneur, like Chatty Cathy, pep rally, a white female in her 40s, right? It was like
Mhm,
me. And Amani's like, that's awesome. But like we can't talk to you every week. Like like
mhm.
he's like,
Yeah,
you need, it was about our guest. It started with our guest, but then it was a
yeah.
challenge to look within of like, who are you hanging out with? What are
Mhm.
your conversations?
Right.
How do those conversations move forward? How are you moving people forward? So it was, Amani's challenge to me, which I mean, it was over a year ago and I really thought
Mhm.
deeply about that. So I appreciate, so it
Yeah.
wasn't your official ABC chart, but
Okay. Yeah.
It was Amani's ABC challenge to me, which
Yeah,
I
no, I
appreciated.
like that. I like that, the exercises out there, but that Amani, you did challenge because
Mhm.
I did the same thing. If you all know Tracy Stuckrath, Eating at a Meeting, she has a podcast in the food space, and we had a whole conversation about food and DEI. And then I looked through her list of guests, and I'm like, there are Black chefs, Latinx chefs, LGBTQ chefs, and people in the
Yes.
food space. And what happens, what the exercise gets us to see is that not only do we surround ourselves with people who look like us, that's who we're most comfortable talking to. So if you have to go up to someone and your name is Mandy and someone else's name is Chigamanda, or Shariga, and you don't know how to pronounce it, that
Mm,
initial fright of like, oh, I don't know how to pronounce their name. I don't know, what country, where their country is. Maybe I don't know their political views. So let me go to someone who's going to make me feel comfortable, and
Mhm.
we run towards comfort. And so, in
mm,
doing that, we end up avoiding conflict. And what I say about avoiding conflict is it is conflict, right? So, when we never build up the resources and tools on how to manage it, we just create conflict for ourselves. And so, in order to work through that, you have to say, okay, I'm going to look for guests who are outside of that, homogenous, identity. I'm going to ask people, even when people are putting together speakers and they say, oh, we're going to get this one keynote speaker because they do this. I say, have you looked for the person who disagrees with them? And they're like, why would
mm.
we do that? And I'm like, because there's somebody in the audience who disagrees with that speaker. And they're going to want to know that there's a conversation. It's supposed to be dialogue. We're supposed to engage in dialogue, not just be agreeable. Even diversity is not just about achieving agreeability in the boardroom. It's about, can people share their ideas, challenge you? And so people with different lived experiences, different identities are going to do that. They're going to challenge you.
So speaking of conflict, like that I want to hang there for a second because like
Mhm.
if the audience, if we have people in our lives that we know that have no desire to know anybody or get to know anybody outside of what they know, in fact, they have strong opinions of people out that are not like them, right?
Mhm.
Or they have had some experiences with one particular group of people, and so everybody like that group is bad to them or whatever.
Mhm.
How do we shepherd those conversations in a productive way instead of avoiding them? How do
Mhm.
we create that positive tension or that conflict to maybe help other people see the other side of things?
I call that learning to speak that person's language. And it's a heavy burden to carry, and I don't recommend it for everybody because, you know, it's emotionally laborious to have to convince somebody to value someone that they've excluded or have a bias towards. But if you speak that person's language, so if a person likes food, and I've done this exercise with fathers who will come up to me and they're like, I want to teach my kids, and specifically, I'm talking about one individual. I want to teach my kids how to not be biased, how to be accepting. I said, we'll take them to a restaurant, of a different ethnic group, Chinese food, Japanese food, Mexican food, Dominican food, and get them to learn the language, learn the different food names, learn where Dominican Republic is, learn the way they prepare food, learn the cultural practices. And so expose somebody through something that they like, food, music, the books that they read. Oh, this is a good book. Have you read an author who, writes similar within the anime space, within the futuristic space that is of this identity? And maybe not even tell them, but here's another book that you might like. Oh, I know watch this particular movie. Have you thought about watching, you like Friends? That's great. How about trying Living Single? you know, tr-
Mm.
try. There's a whole
Yeah.
background story to that, but try to challenge yourself or challenge that person. And maybe not challenge is the right word to use in somebody who's actively resistant, but invite them to expose them to different ethnic groups, identities, lived experiences, and all that through the language that they speak.
Great tip.
Mhm.
That's great
Yeah.
suggestion.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
You mentioned, hold on. So I had a question. Oh, comfort. And you say people really they try to stay away from being uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Based on your experience, both in the military, in life, and with your work as, a DE&I expert, why do you think that's the case?
Um, the bottom line, we're socialized to be that way, like those taboo conversations. I think of, don't talk about money, don't talk about your sex life, don't talk about what are the other taboo topics? There's religion,
Politics.
politics. We wrote Tanita Mullen and I wrote a whole article about the conversation around politics in our industry. It is
Mhm.
unavoidable.
Mhm.
Can I get that in the flashing lights? If you're
Mhm.
dealing with destinations, if you're engaging people, I think we found that out during pandemic. I
Mhm.
digress. But we are socialized to not talk about taboo topics, and in doing so, year after year after year, schooling in the workplace, we again do not develop the tools and resources to put in our bag on how to have a conversation about something either we don't know about, something we disagree with, or even the way how to deliver, our ideas and perspective to someone. And I was having this conversation with my sister the other day. No matter what you're talking about, where you're coming from different angles, you feel tense. And it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to be prepared for the comeback, or I'm going to make sure, I'm make sure I'm preparing my next, statement. Well, you're not listening when you're doing that. But
Mhm.
it's we're socialized to just avoid taboo topics. And I'm built differently. I love to have those conversations. I love to
Me
talk about
too.
religion and politics, and because I want to deepen my understanding. And so yeah, I think that is why we do it, because we're socialized, we're trained, we're programmed, however, whatever words you want to use. And again, we have to actively challenge ourselves to say, okay, I think this way. I'm a Christian. What do Muslims think? What do
Mhm.
Buddhists think? What
Mm.
does the Quran say? What is the history of this, and not through, again, being careful of the lens through which you learn about something. So people will be like, oh, I watched the documentary. First question that I ask when people say they watch a documentary: who's the author? Who put it together? Who's the source? Because you have to be careful. People will give you information through their lens and not
Right.
through the lens of the people who embrace that religion or practice that religion. So,
And then, well, my follow up question to that, in terms of being uncomfortable, is that it's obvious from your career and
mhm,
life that you have to kind of develop and grow a growth mindset. How have
mhm.
you been able to do that and consistently continue to do that as you kind of continue about your career and life?
Mm, I just like to avoid being boring. That's how, at its basic level, I think it's boring to not expose yourself to different foods. I live vicariously through people. Okay. So if I can't travel somewhere, then I'm finding people who have been to a place that I want to go and asking them about their experiences. But I do have advantage. My privilege is that, when I first started in the military as a reservist, I was what we call a civil affairs specialist. And that is where you train in the culture and practices of the host country. And so that came in handy. I went to Iraq twice. You learn the practices on how to, approach someone's home, how to get to know that family before you share personal information or before you ask sensitive information. And so I had to train officers on how to, again, speak the language of the people that were hosting us. And so that has just shaped me to when I talk to someone, I'm like, okay, excuse me, what did you have for breakfast? And they'll say, I had, this particular dish, this kind of sausage. And I'll be like, okay, where does that sausage? I will start digging. I go down a rabbit hole
Mm.
because I get really curious about, why did you choose that? Are you on a diet? Do you like meat? When did you become a vegan? And we can have a whole conversation. I always say I can have conversation about a piece of lint because I want to know, the details. And yeah, so just avoiding, I think, we get comfortable in just knowing what we know. I have a Calvin and Hobbes cartoon that says, I don't want to know anymore. I'm good with what I know and I don't want to learn anymore. I don't want any more books. I don't want anybody to teach me anything. And that's just not me. I want to learn, and I live my life through learning and exploring, and through food, through music, through people. So yeah.
Okay. So Melissa Majors is tuning in. Hi, Melissa. She
Hey,
says you are
Melissa.
fierce.
Yay.
She
My
says
favorite
you are fierce,
person.
Zoe. Choose curiosity. So yes, she's my favorite, one of our favorite people too. One of my favorite people.
Yes.
Thank you for chiming in, Melissa. Over to
Yes.
you, Mandy. Before I mean, I got a whole list, so
I know, I get a whole list too. I know. I want to talk about the NASA idea panel.
Mm-hmm.
This is cool, right? So
Yeah.
you were on the NASA idea panel. What
Still.
is it? Oh, you still are. Okay. What
Mm-hmm.
is this? And then
Mm-hmm.
how did you get involved and what ideas are on the table?
If I tell you, I might have to take you out.
Oh, snap! Don't take
And
me
she can
out.
take you out too. She knows how to shoot a weapon, so be careful.
Good.
I
She
just came from
could.
the range. No,
We'll
no.
have a
Okay.
push-up
So
contest. Yeah.
prior to NASA, I was at NSA. So I always say that when I don't want to talk about it. But no. Um, it basically, this is, again, NASA saying that they want to make sure that individuals who are in their programs, work for them, are being inclusive. And so we review different information and things that they propose, and to make sure that they understand how to be inclusive, how to get results that are diverse. And yeah, that's about what I can say. Yeah, how about this? I have taken what I've done with them and doing with them to back to clients who have organizations who are saying, okay, who have chapters, and they say, okay, this chapter wants to get, say, like MPI, they want to get the Rise Award, they want to get this. Well, a portion of a particular proposal has to include, how are you committed to DEI, right? And so There would be the DEI committee that then reviews that portion of that application for whether it's a board role, whether it's the Rise Award, whether whatever, reviews that portion, make sure that it has the components that it needs in order to truly help the organization be committed. And so then the people who submitted that proposal get a review back that says, yeah, how are you going to make sure this is happening? How about you increase the amount of money that you invest in, how about you change your selection process for your leadership role? And they get that feedback
Mm,
and they have the choice to change their proposal, make it better, or drop out of the program, you
I
know.
love it. And
So
how'd
that
you get involved? How did you get involved? Does NASA just call you one day? They slide into your DMs? Like, how'd you get involved with this?
I was in the military for 12 years and worked at the NSA. No, it's an application process. It was,
Okay.
I got notified by another colleague that there was an opportunity. I filled out the application process. It's another consultant company that's managing it. And they're amazing. And I'm just learning so much, that I got feedback on my feedback. And so it's
Mm.
this opportunity to grow, and it's a mix of DEI therapy for me, but also like constantly being in DEI school, because it's, you're with some serious experts in this space and they're asking you, have you thought deeper about this particular, aspect? And yeah, so it was a selection process, and I got, notified that I was selected, and my son and I did cartwheels and ran around like
Aw, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah,
yeah.
Well,
yeah.
and on that, one last thing.
Mhm.
DE&I versus DEB. So I have heard diversity, equity, and inclusion, diversity, equity, and belonging. What's the right
Mhm.
way to say it, and what's the difference between the two?
Ooh, how much time do we have?
Oh.
20 more minutes. You got 20 more minutes. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Let me see. In short, so the ones that I focus on that I think are interchangeable, and there's lots, like you said, you mentioned DEI, DEIB, JEDI, IDEA, all good. I use DEI or EDI. Now, I name myself a strategic EDI consultant because I put the emphasis on equity. I have this quote that I always use: when inclusion is the behavior, equity is a strategy, then diversity will be the result. And so I'm very intentional about how I use those words, right? Is that in order for something to become a behavior, it requires repetition. It requires that you have to learn and actually apply what you're learning. And then equity, you have to be, again, intentional about doing this work. It's not passive, it's not performative. And then again, the results of doing both of those combined is diversity. And so when I see people creating more acronyms, that's all good and fun. I just want to make sure that you're doing the work. What are the results? What are the outcomes of what you're doing? You can make the acronym as long as you need to, but you spend a lot of time making acronyms instead of being intentional about the work that needs to be accomplished. Now, I do have an issue with the B, and this is newer for me. Because as you have to examine everything that you think about. Of course, I saw people putting on the B and I was like, oh yeah, belonging, that sounds amazing. The more and more that I read about it and digest it for myself, one, I don't want to belong to an organization. It kind of gets into this like ownership mind that the organization that
Mm.
I work for, I belong there. Belonging also kind of implies like a culture fit versus being a culture add. Again, embracing our differences. I'm not trying to fit in somewhere, belong somewhere where I'm accepted um, based on the in group standard. I'm trying to show that I have an add. I want to be valued. I want to be heard. I want to be seen. And so this is just kind of sometimes it gets into the differences of words, the play on words, and people think, oh, just more words to understand. I just think the conversation is nuanced, right? On, who's defining belonging? What do you mean when you say belonging? Because people throw a lot of words out there. It's about trust, it's about vulnerability, it's about being authentic. Define the words for me first
Mm.
before you start using them, and then making sure that we're on the same page and having the same conversation. So belonging is one of those where people have good intentions when they say it, but I think if they examine the word itself, and it can result in groupthink. It can result in people not wanting to challenge the status quo because, in order to belong, to be accepted, then I have to go with the flow. Versus, like I say, I'm a strategic disruptor. If I'm in the room, you can pretty much bet I'm gonna ask a question about why do we do that?
Mhm.
What is this way? One of the classic things, one of my colleagues, my friends, my brother, Rob Leva, he was given the responsibility of telling me when I was with MPI Northern California chapter, maybe Zoe needs to learn how the board works. And so maybe we should teach her because you asked the question about why do we use Robert's rules of order? And I said, oh, no, no, I understand Robert's rules of order. I want to know who he is. I want to know, you know. And so I ask questions to examine why do we do this thing? So when we use acronyms, again, it's great DEI. Even we want to understand the history of the D. How did it become equity versus equality? You want to understand the words that you're using and not just toss them around. Because if you're tossing words around, typically that means you're not applying them. And
Mhm.
when it comes time, when it's go time, when you're face to face with that conflict, you'll be like, DEIB, DEIB,
Mm.
and it's like,
Yeah,
what does that mean to you? And what does that mean in the conversation? What is the nuance? What are we talking about? And so, yeah, that's my long and short of it. I could
that's
talk
awesome.
about that
Okay.
for.
All right. You
Yeah.
mentioned strategic disruptor. That's what you
Mm,
are. What has been
mhm.
your most favorite disruption that you've ever witnessed?
Mm.
Ooh, oh my gosh, that's a long list, Amani.
Well, give me your top 3 or 5, the top 3 or 5. 3
Oh,
to
the
5.
top 3 or 5. I I think this fits the category. Well, they're starting to come. Okay, here they go. They're
There
like
you
a
go. There you go.
flow. um, it's the speaker lineup. That has been disruptive both online and reaching out to that organization, and saying that have you not learned anything from what we've been discussing since the social reckoning? You have a mantle or everybody on the panel or the speaker stage looks the same. And here's where you're doing a disservice to your audience. Um, I think that's uncomfortable for the organizers to even think about that because the first thing, well, I didn't mean to do it intentionally. Or they'll say things like, we're choosing the best people. And I'm like, oh, pause right there, put a pin right there. What do you mean by the best people? And let's look back the last 3 to 4 conferences. So, what you're meaning to tell me that the best people all look the same? All the best people went to Harvard and Yale.
Mm.
All the best people have been in the industry over 20 years. So, you're completely excluding, these groups. So, speaker lineups, because they're very visual,
Mhm.
and because within our industry that hasn't been challenged, and that goes also into the teams that are executing, that are planning the event. um, what speakers have said, I'll stay in that lane. How do you handle? I was at an event where the person invited to speak just went down all the stereotypical jokes that they could say. The whole entire room was uncomfortable.
Mm.
People were looking at each other. I mean, it was sexist, it was racist. Everything was coming out of this person's mouth. And I mean, I literally wanted to go grab the mic, but I was like, it's not my place to grab the mic. And in that point, I realized that no one again has the tools on how to stop this in the middle. The AV team doesn't know, they don't have any instructions. The person hosting the event is too uncomfortable to cut off the speaker, and so challenging, that disrupting that space. How do you do that? So that built a whole workshop on building practices, being proactive. If this are to happen, what do I do? And that actually became, another colleague of mine. You can look on LinkedIn. I won't call her out. She challenged a speaker who said some very sexist things at a conference, and I chimed in because people were defending the speaker. Do you know how amazing he is, and all that kind of stuff? And I'm
Mm.
like, still doesn't take away from the fact that he said these things on stage. So what are you trying to say? We need to address the
Mhm.
behavior.
Mhm.
We're not tearing down the character of the person. So that's two: the speaker lineup, what a speaker says on stage, and how to handle it. Um, And just overall, whatever boardroom, whatever, room that I'm in, I'm just asking questions just to see if we're talking about it. And that article that we wrote about politics in our industry led to a series of conversations around the destinations that we select. And I love this conversation because we're still actively having it around discriminatory laws being
Mhm.
passed in different destinations. Florida, to be specific, are you going to take a group to Florida whose psychological and physical um, safety is, threatened, by discriminatory laws? So, yeah, I think those are the things that, you know, that I've disrupted in those spaces, to be sure,
Mhm.
because like I said, that conversation is the most recent one, the most active. But those are three. Does that work? Three to five.
Yeah,
Three to five.
that
Yeah.
works. That works.
Yeah.
Um, my next question, before we kind of let you turn the tables, would be, what's been the most valuable lesson you've learned from your son, Jordan?
Oh, to be your own hype woman or person. Yes, that we did, and I say we because he was sitting in the front row when I did Pure Michigan. That was an amazing the Pure Michigan Governors Conference. That was an amazing opportunity. I called him out when I was on stage and all that kind of stuff. And there was a line of people to talk to me after the fact. And then what happened is we went back to the room and he was like, "Mom, let's go." And we just start jumping around the room. And he was just like,
Ah,
chest up, let's go, let's go. We got this. We did that. We did that. Air punches. And it was hype yourself up, allow yourself to celebrate um, and reflect on where you come from and the point that you are. And so, yes, he has taught me a lot of lessons, but that's the one that comes to mind.
Okay.
ah,
So
be your own hype. We all need that. We all need to be our own hype person. I love
Yeah,
that. That's great.
absolutely. Absolutely.
now we've come to the point in the show where we flip the script. So you can ask
Okay.
me a question, you can ask Mandy a question, any question, nothing is off limits, except if we have to take you away if you want us to answer like they do at the NSA, then that would be one of those instances. However, who do you want to ask the question to first, and what's the question?
I'm going to start with Mandy. Mandy. The
Here we
the
go.
the ABC exercise that was not the exercise that I do, but that Armani, challenged you on. You know, how did you feel then? How do you feel now?
Well, I loved it. I like to be challenged. I
Mhm,
like when people call out things I'm doing or not doing. I appreciate that. But it was coming at a time where I was getting all the different guests and they were all like me. And it's just because I wanted to talk to people like me. But
mhm,
then I appreciated, like, I think our guests are so different now
mhm,
because of that. So I love it. And I want more of that. I love it and I want more of it. In fact, our Southern California Weekon, our whole speaker platform that we get every year is getting more and more diverse and all the different voices are being heard. And I think a
mhm.
lot to do with Amani's leadership and challenging us each year with that. So I love that. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Answer.
that was your initial gut reaction response? Like, give it to me raw. Like, when he said
It
that to
was.
you, it was. Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know.
I don't
And
think enough people aren't honest and raw like that. I love that. I appreciate that.
okay. And then Amani, let's see. I'm going to keep it in the realm. It could be a question about anything, right?
Anything, yes, anything.
Okay. You live in what, Southern Los Angeles or Southern California?
Southern California, yes.
Southern California. How has this conversation, um, been for you throughout your career? How have you, as a DJ, um, really promoted this conversation around, what we learned in 2020? How have you used your platform to do that?
I would say as a DJ, really, I was speaking through the lens of I became MPI Southern California chapter president as a DJ in 2021 and 2022. And I was very vocal about it then because we were kind of coming off of like George Floyd, and I was the first African American president of the chapter in 44 years. So thank you.
44.
I
44.
did I kind of spoke through it through that, and then also through my teaching. Like I teach at a school where it's primarily first generation college students,
Mhm.
primarily Asian, then Latin American, then white, then black. So I always try to expose them to different opportunities that they might not be exposed to normally or traditionally. And so that's kind of how I use my platform, is trying to be a voice of reason and exposing my students to different opportunities, and just always, as Mandy shared, making sure that if I'm part of any organization, we try to, when we're planning events, make sure there's like diverse people in the group selecting the speakers, and then diverse representation on the speakers if possible, and just really pushing us to think differently and to be consistent. Like it's okay to do it for one weekend, but let's continue throughout each and
Mm.
every event, whether it be say the industry, weekon. That's kind of how I'm using my voice and my platform to spread the knowledge there.
Okay.
Um,
Can I ask
Shelly,
a combined question?
you can. Shelly
Oh,
Vassar-Gilliam's in the chat. Thank you.
Oh,
Good. Thank you for joining.
oh,
yeah.
Shelly.
Yes. She also put out,
Hey.
I also wrote a book. I wrote a book and kind of added it into my book, The DJ's
Mhm.
Mean Business. And then my second book
Mhm.
is really about like kind of diversity in terms of why there are no longer any black R&B groups in existence. And that gets into some issues too. So
Yes, yes,
that's
it
a different
does.
topic for a different day, but that's a hot topic
You
there.
know, I would love to do a session, the intersection of like music and history. I work with a company now that has a presentation. It's called Unexpected Atlanta. They do virtual, but they do like through the history of music, teaching you about DEI. And oh, it's amazing.
Yes.
Amazing. We should do
Yes.
something
Absolutely.
similar. That would be
I
great.
see you, Chris, in the chat. Thank you for joining us, Chris. What was your joint question that you had for us?
What has been like the biggest challenge of you all working together in different styles, delivery, lived experiences? Where have you had like a how have you
Hmm.
managed what conflict have you had and how did you manage that conflict?
Biggest challenge. Huh.
Ooh.
I would say really the challenge, really, it's just logistics. I would say just
Mhm.
logistics in terms of like lining up all the guests and moving from because we used to do this once or twice a month. Then we
Okay.
shifted to weekly. So that's a logistical challenge. And then just making sure that we continue, that our guests continue to reflect diversity. That's a conscious effort, and then making sure that we're growing this show across all the social platforms, on the podcasting platforms, getting sponsorships. I think that would probably be the second challenge, which has been pretty new, is kind of monetizing the show, because we
Mhm.
have a great audience and we also have large followings. So how do you monetize that? Those would be the two that come to mind for me. What about you, Mandy?
No, I mean, it's just like any new business, right? You're growing a business, and once you get one thing down, then you've got a whole new set of challenges. And logistics is always going to be a challenge with a weekly show, right? You have a guest that can't show up, or you have a scheduling
Mhm.
kerfuffle. That stuff happens, right? That's just a part of it. Um, and then I think Amani and I, at the beginning, I think he and I both were like, "Well, who's doing what here?" And we were both sort of doing everything, and then we really honed in on our division of labor. And then I
Mhm.
think we're in a really sweet spot. Like it's really clear about who does what, but I think we're both also open to stretching a little bit
Mhm.
too. So, I mean, I think, and I don't even think that's a challenge. I think that's just like natural growing
Mhm.
pains of, running an organization, two people
Mhm.
running an organization together. So, and
Yeah.
I think we want to keep getting better, so I
Yeah.
think
Hmm.
that's a challenge too. Like we want to keep getting better. We want like this whole conversation we had at the top of the show. Like I was listening and I'm like, wait, we used to have fun at the beginning of the show. Now we're like just promoting
That's so
everything. Like let's get
serious.
back to
Yeah.
what like the reason we started this is because we loved doing these
Mhm.
live things together. Like, how do we do it more? So I think the challenge also is like remembering what our roots were
Mhm.
and why did we start this, and staying true to that. I think we
Mhm.
both kind of have to kick each other in the pants on that a little bit. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Mandy did a good job. She did a good job of bringing it
Yeah.
up, saying, "Hey, let's not just jump into the show. Let's kind of have a little bit of rapport, bouncing back and forth." So
Mhm.
that's what we talk about my birthday and everything. So that was good.
Yeah, I
So
hear free Cold Stone for life. There's
yes, I
also there there's also a connection though. You did mention, did I hear you right, Waldorf Astoria? So whenever
yeah.
I'm having a conversation with
Mhm.
people or as I try to connect people, I always look for the red thread, right? And so Amani, you were talking about your birthday. You were promoting or mentioning Waldorf Astoria for my birthday. My son took me to the Waldorf Astoria here in Atlanta. I had a spa treatment. We stayed at a
Ah,
suite. And then my sister and my niece joined me, and we ordered a huge, like, room service breakfast. It was amazing. So,
Nice.
yes, I second that. My birthday was August 19th. Mhm.
All right. I got a shout out also Phyllis Williams Straughter.
happy
Thank you for being
birthday.
here with us. And then
Mhm.
also
Oh,
Dr. Will
yes.
Moreland.
We love
Thank you for
her.
tuning in too over
Mhm.
on Facebook. So, Zoe, our final question, my final question for you would be,
Okay.
and I'm trying to think, were you still in the Bay Area when you turned 21 or were you already where were you when you
Ooh.
turned
Ooh, 21. I was standing on a table at a sushi restaurant.
21? Oh,
That was
okay.
at night. It was my like, I was trying all kinds of sushi in Mountain View, California,
Okay.
and I was also in the reserves. So my unit during the day gave me like a little cake, and I was in full battle rattle within Moffett Airfield. So my
Okay.
21st birthday was very memorable.
So I'm going to say that Zoe of today walks up to Zoe when she turned 21 as you're walking out of that restaurant in Mountain View, California, and gives your younger self some advice based on what you know now. What
Mhm.
advice would that be?
Um, ooh, wow. Okay, y'all be asking those questions that I have to really
Yes.
think about.
Yes.
What advice would I give my younger self? Just because we had this conversation in the beginning about fitness. Um, love the amount of physical training that you do. The early mornings of PT and push-ups and running. I got to a point where I was very muscular, and I didn't think that that was feminine because I worked out so much and I wanted to be softer.
Mm.
And now getting back into shape is harder. So I would tell myself to keep, that routine, keep that behavior, eat lots of sushi still. And I don't have any regrets about joining the military. It was challenging, so I won't go there. The friends that I was with, Nicole and Sonia, are still friends to this day. And so, yeah, I would tell myself just to really appreciate the level of physical fitness that I was engaged in. I miss doing push-ups, if you can actually say that. I, I miss running really fast. I miss just being in my tip-top shape. I do miss that.
All right.
Yeah.
How can we best support you? I guess we have your LinkedIn down there on
Mhm.
the ticker. That's the best way to reach you and stay in touch with you.
Yeah. Yeah, LinkedIn is but yeah, let's say that. Don't just connect with me, don't just follow me on LinkedIn, engage in
There
conversation.
you
I
go.
ask questions, I repost articles, I tell you about authors that I like. Most recently, it's been Elizabeth Liba. I got her book, I'm Not Yelling, and I did a whole session at PCM Educon about I'm not intimidated or I'm not intimidating, you're intimidated. We had a whole
Mhm.
a whole session on imposter
Mm.
syndrome and Elizabeth Liva. So whenever I repost something that she says, it's because it's challenging me. And I want people to be challenged and I want them to engage in dialogue. So don't just follow, don't just connect and be passive in your paying attention to throw some questions out there, throw your insights, jump in the conversation. That's the best support.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you all the work that you're doing in the
Mhm.
industry and beyond. We are very honored that you came and spent some time with us
My
today.
pleasure.
Can't
My
wait to
pleasure.
talk to you again soon, and hopefully,
Yes.
Yeah.
see you soon as well.
IMAX? IMAX? Are y'all going to IMAX?
TBD, TBD.
Okay, to BT. And the other opportunity, September 30th in Louisville, Kentucky. This is my spotlight right here. for No Madness Fest 2023 happening in Louisville.
Okay.
The Louisville tourism team is super supportive, and it's really connected to this conversation around DEI and the economic impact. So if y'all are in Louisville, come to Kentucky. That's where I'll be.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Appreciate it. Send a link. We'll share the link too.
I will.
And round of applause and just thank you so much for being
My
so open and
pleasure.
honest.
Yeah,
Yes.
pleasure. Thanks. I enjoy
Thank
Yep.
you.
you. We love talking to you. Thank
I
you.
love talking to you too.
Yeah. All right. We're gonna put you back in the green room. Mandy, we'll be back next week at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. on the West Coast with another guest. And that'll be that, right?
That will be that. We'll see you then. Thanks for tuning in. This was awesome.
Yes. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon and have a great week. And can't wait to chat with you again next week. And thanks again to our guest, Zoe Moore. Take care, everyone.